Hello everyone. Today I am going to show you the recipe of an eggless cake using isabgol, which is a psyllium husk, as a substitute for egg in combination with milk cream. Now the ingredients that are required are, I am going to be making this with multigrain atta. Then I'm using just normal cooking oil. There's a bit of water which I will use for soaking the psyllium husk and allowing it to rise. So let that be the first thing that we do. Since this is a chocolate cake, there is also unsweetened cocoa, and I'm using boiling hot milk. I don't know if you can see it in the cup. So the first thing that we do is soak the psyllium husk while we work with the rest of the ingredients. So this recipe is from Riddhi Jhankaria's recipe for eggless cake, but since I'm making the whole grain version, the measurements are slightly different. So she has used 1 teaspoon, but because we are using multigrain atta, I have increased it to 1.5 teaspoon. I'm soaking it in just about 20-30 ml of water. Just make the whole thing wet. Now what this does is, psyllium husk has this glycoprotein called mucilage, which functions pretty much like egg. And egg has many functionalities in a cake. It binds, it's a leavening agent, it gives strength, texture, etc. to the cake. So you can see it has started going translucent. It's going to need about 2-3 minutes to gel up properly. So in short, it's a bit like a gel, which is going to substitute pretty well for egg whites. Now what I'm using here is Ashirwad Multi-grain atta. This recipe is for about 350 grams of cake. You can scale it up accordingly. The ingredients I'm showing you are the ones I have experimented with. If you want to substitute, you're going to have to try on your own and see what works for you. Okay, you'll need about 100 grams of atta. There we go. There we are, and in the same you can add 11 grams of cocoa powder. Now cocoa powder gives the flavor of chocolate, but it is also a gluten-free powder, which means it prohibits the binding of the cake. So you invariably need to add a little more moisture to keep the cake together. To the same thing, we add 1 teaspoon baking powder. There. And because we are using whole grain atta, about 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda instead of the 2 pinches that Riddhi recommends. Now the key is to mix everything properly multiple times. It really does help in making the cake fluffy. You can use a normal sieve also. Since I have a sifter, I'm going to use a flour sifter to mix everything together. This brings about that extra fluff to the flour and cocoa powder mixture which you may otherwise lack. There, we do this a few times to mix everything together. As you can see, the flour is already looking puffy and airy. I'm not doing a very neat job of it. Things are falling out. But as you can see, when you shake it a little bit, the whole mixture has become very nice and airy. So that's our flour, baking powder, baking soda and cocoa powder mixture. In the meantime, can you see how gelled this has become? It's moving like a coagulated mass. So this, as I said, is the replacement for egg that we'll be using. So transfer it to the bowl that you're going to use. You really don't need blender for this. So as I said, the whole thing just came out. It's a glutinous kind of mask. Now you're going to need roughly 2 tablespoons of cream. Now cream adds protein and also helps retain the moisture to make the cake moist. So it's a combination of cream and isabgol that we are using as a replacement for egg. And once again, as I said, since we are using whole grain, I'll be using a bit of extra cream. Riddhi's recipe calls for 2 tablespoons. I'll use around 3. There you go. And you don't really need to use a blender, just mix it by hand. So this sort of becomes a replacement. There, as you can see, it's become like a jelly. Now I'm going to add the oil to the hot milk. Stir it together like that and pour it to into your mixture. When you are at this stage, you can start preheating your oven. Now to this psyllium milk and oil mixture, you can add powdered sugar. You're going to need about 75 grams of powdered sugar because chocolate cake needs a bit extra sugar, both for keeping the structure intact. And sugar not only adds flavor, it helps the whole cake stay together by caramelizing when it cooks. So don't think that sugar causes only sweetness, and that's why whenever you try to substitute sugar with something else, you have to think up of relevant changes in the other ingredients to make sure that your cake still holds together really well. So I'm just whisking them together. It's not like I'm using a blender. If you want, you can use it, but it's not necessary. Once this is done, I'm at a stage where I'm about to add baking powder, baking soda. So I get my tin ready. And the way I do it is to make sure that everything releases properly. What I do is first, I'm giving a coat of oil at the base, then adding my baking paper. Actually, this is butter paper, not baking paper, to the base, and give a coat of oil on top of it as well. So on a cursory glance, it would look like there is no paper here at all. Then add a bit more oil and coat the sides as well. Eggless cakes release really well from the side, and the butter paper at the base makes sure that the cake comes out clean, so that the wastage is really nil in case of eggless cakes. Okay, here we are. Now we are ready to start adding the dry mix. As you can see, it's nice and powdery and fluffy. This one is required to make sure that the cake is nice and airy when you're making it eggless. In case of eggs, when you beat up the egg whites, that pretty much takes care of proper mixing and all the air incorporation inside the cake. In eggless cake, you always have to go that extra mile to make sure that there is enough structure as well as air in the mix to give you a nice fluffy cake. So it will slowly start taking the texture of cake batter. As you can see, it's beginning to thicken a little bit now. Now for the oil that I'm using, I have taken sunflower oil. Mine is Fortune sunflower oil. You can take any cooking oil. Try avoiding groundnut, because groundnut has a very characteristic smell of it. Or so to say, my experiment with groundnut was terrible. And everything just, ended up smelling like a mixture of groundnuts. So you can, I think, use rice bran oil, olive oil. Okay, I can't think of any other oil right now. And there we go. Try mixing it in small bits, avoiding lumps. Whisk it gently. You can do the same step with the blender also. I'm beginning to get a very nice smell of chocolate cake. Using a silicone spatula, scrape down the sides so that you aren't pasting any batter stuck anywhere at all. Whisk it once again, and I am seeing that the mixture is becoming airy slowly. Clear out your whisk. I like to retrieve as much batter as I can from the whisk also, so that there is no wastage of any kind. Now I will measure my ingredients once. So this quantity is ideal for making a net half kilo cake, because you're also going to be adding cream, right? So I see on my scales currently it is at 475 grams. So that's just about right to make a half kilo cake. And there, as you can see, just tap it a few times to release the big air spaces. Put it in for baking. Now my oven is set to 200, but it delivers 10 degrees lesser. So I will start at 200. After about 10 to 12 minutes, I reduce the temperature to 180. Cover this loosely with the foil and let it bake for another 25 minutes or so. And that is enough. The initial bake is to make sure there's no dense patch at the base. Try to let the cake cool down completely before you release it from the button, because there is a lot of baking that continues to happen even after you've taken your vessel out of your oven. So make sure you give it sufficient time to get cooked, and once it is done, allow it to cool completely, and then you can feed the sugar water and continue to layer your cake. I hope you try the recipe because it worked like magic for me. And the biggest advantage is that, isabgol is a dry ingredient. You can store it at room temperature for a couple of months at least. The only trick being storing the cream, which I find a small bargain compared to what the texture is like when the cake is done. And also, I'm not compelled to store curd all the time in my house. The taste is fantastic, absolutely, eggless, and you can try a gluten-free version also. I'll see if I get time to make a gluten-free version of the same. Good luck, and thanks a lot, Riddhi, for getting me started on this.